Hey guys, welcome back to History with Mrs. Lee. Today we are going to be looking at some of the immigrant groups that arrived to America in the 1800s, as well as groups who participated in Manifest Destiny and who traveled west. Alright, the first group that I would like to look at are the Chinese Americans. Chinese Americans, were facing overcrowding issues in China as well as a civil war, so that would be a push factor that would cause them to leave China. And then they were attracted to coming to America for job opportunities like working on the Transcontinental Railroad, but also the California Gold Rush of 1849. While in America, Chinese Americans faced low wages, poor working conditions, racism, and jealousy from Americans because of taking jobs away from Americans. The result of their move was that many Chinese decided to settle in California, and they become merchants, and they also established Chinatown neighborhoods in places like San Francisco. But probably the biggest result of their move is that Chinese Americans were essential in helping to build the western portion of the Transcontinental Railroad. Now, speaking of California, we have the group called the 49ers. These were men who traveled west to California in 1849 because of the California Gold Rush, and they thought that they were going to be able to get rich quick. Unfortunately, many of these men found little or no gold, and they dealt with a lot of lawlessness because at the time California was not a state. A result of their move is that California quickly became a state in 1850 because, as we remember from the Northwest Ordinance, you needed 60,000 or more people in a territory to apply for statehood in the Union. And so with all of the Chinese who had come over plus the 49ers, you will have more than 60,000, and California became a state in 1850. This is going to lead to some issues that we will talk about when we return from spring break. All right, now a group of immigrants from Ireland came over to the New England states, and they settled predominantly in New York City, Boston, and Philadelphia. And they basically dealt with a push factor. Over in Ireland in the mid-1800s, they were dealing with the potato famine, which led to crop failure and starvation. So many Irish were wanting to come to America to start a new life. When they were here in America, most of these Irish were too poor to afford any sort of train tickets, so most of these Irish decided to stay in the port cities where they arrived, like Boston and New York City. While they're here, they dealt with low wages as well as discrimination because they were Catholics, which was a little bit different than the majority of the Americans at the time who were Protestants. The Irish helped build the Erie Canal, and they also built the eastern portion of the Transcontinental Railroad. And we've discussed this before, but the Erie Canal is important, yes, because of the changes in transportation. It's going to make it more efficient and effective, but you would see towns and cities pop up along the canal because people wanted to have easier access to travel and trade. All right, another group of people in America who participated in Manifest Destiny were the Mormons. And the Mormons originally lived in New York, but in New York they were persecuted for their faith. And so leaders Joseph Smith and Brigham Young took the Mormons west, and they settled in Salt Lake City, Utah, out in the middle of the desert. And they went to Salt Lake City, Utah for religious freedom and to escape persecution. Some people had been killed because of their religion, so they felt like this would be a safer place for the Mormons. While out in Utah, they used their position out in the middle of the desert to start selling products to people who were traveling along the Oregon Trail. And so we've talked about the Oregon Trail. Many people started out here about in Missouri, and they would travel along this trail through the mountains to get out west, either to Oregon or maybe to California to join in with the gold rush. Okay. Finally, the last group of people that I would like to discuss are the Germans. And the Germans were dealing with an unstable government, and they were interested in the pull factor of economic opportunities, lots of jobs available here in America instead of back home in Europe. So the Germans came over, and some of them settled in New York and Pennsylvania, but a lot of the Germans actually ended up settling in the Midwest along the Great Lakes. And so this area like Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio. You'll find several German immigrants living there. Okay? Now, when they came to America, just like the Irish, they also dealt with discrimination from American citizens because of their Catholicism. And one of the results of the German immigrants' move is that they bring over the concept of kindergarten, so that's going to impact education. We talked about the polka music, as well as Grimm Brothers fairy tales, which have greatly influenced American culture today with Disney. Now, a term that we just discussed this morning was a term called nativism or nativists. So nativists practice nativism, and that was U.S.-born citizens who discriminated against immigrants. And that could be because of culture differences, but a lot of it was because U.S.-born citizens felt like these immigrants were taking away jobs from American-born citizens. And we also discussed the creation of the American Party, which went against the Democratic Party in the 1850s, and it was sometimes called the Know-Nothing Party. And this was a political group that pushed for laws to prevent immigrants from holding political office, laws to limit immigration, and an increase in the amount of time necessary for immigrants to be granted the right to vote. So even though lots of immigrant groups moved to America looking for a better life, many of them actually dealt with several problems, or even more problems than what they were dealing with back at home.